"You're making that horse worse, not better." That was the first thing she ever said to him. Not "Your Grace," not "My King," not the trembling silence that usually greeted the Alpha King of the Eastern Reach when he entered a room. Just a woman swinging down from a tired horse, squinting at his work, and telling him he was doing it wrong. He was kneeling in the mud outside the stable in a rough brown shirt with the sleeves rolled past his elbows. His dark hair was sticking up on one side. There was dirt on his jaw and straw on his trousers, and he looked, by careful design, like exactly what she assumed he was: a stable hand at a minor lord's country estate, tending a lame mare he did not know how to treat. She crouched beside him without asking permission. She reached for the mare's leg without asking permission. She looked him in the eye and said, "Yarrow is fine for a fresh wound, but that swelling has been there at least 5 days. You need comfrey root and cold water wraps." And Fenrir Renwick, ruler of the Eastern Reach, commander of 13 sworn packs, the most feared alpha from the Grey March border to the Southern Sea, looked at this woman with the mud on her boots and the herb satchel on her hip, and the complete, magnificent absence of deference in her voice, and he made a choice. "I'm Fen," he said. "I tend the horses here." He let her believe it. He would let her believe it for 5 days. He would let her boss him around his own stable, correct his grip on a bridle, critique his cooking, and fall asleep by his fire with her guard down for the first time in 7 years. He would let her fall in love with a man who did not exist. And then she would find the portrait. The lodge was smaller than she expected. Roslyn had been riding for 3 days on a tip from an innkeeper in Grey Hollow, who had mentioned that a lord's country estate up the North Road needed a horse healer. Big gray mare, favoring her left fore. They sent for someone from the capital, but that was a week ago, and no one's come. He had shrugged. Might pay well if you get there first. She had gotten there first. The clearing opened suddenly, the way forest clearings always did in the north, as though the trees had simply decided to stop. The lodge sat at its center, 2 stories of weathered gray stone with a slate roof gone green with moss. Smoke curled from a chimney. A stable block extended from the eastern wall, modest but well kept, the wood recently oiled. Behind it, a paddock stretched toward the tree line where a chestnut gelding stood flicking his tail at flies. It was quiet. No servants in the yard, no hounds, no banners. Good. Roslyn preferred the quiet ones. The minor lords with small holdings and smaller egos, who paid in coin and let her work without hovering. The grand estates, the ones with crests above the gate and guards at every door, those she avoided. She had learned young that the bigger the house, the more dangerous the men inside it. She spotted him as she brought her horse to a stop near the water trough. He was kneeling in the mud beside the stable entrance, both hands on the gray mare's left foreleg, his brow furrowed in concentration. The poultice wrapped around the joint was thick and uneven, packed with what looked like river clay and crushed yarrow. "That poultice is all wrong, you know," she said. He looked up. Gold eyes. That was the first thing she noticed. Not brown, not amber, but a clear, bright gold, like sunlight through honey. They caught her off guard for a moment. Those eyes. Stable hands did not usually have eyes like that, but he was muddy and rumpled, and his dark hair was sticking up on one side, as though he had slept on it wrong, and the impression passed. "Is it?" he said. Not a question, a flat, almost amused statement. "Yarrow's fine for a fresh wound, but that swelling's been there at least 5 days. You need comfrey root and cold water wraps, alternating, or the inflammation will just keep cycling." She was already swinging down from her saddle, her satchel bumping against her hip. "I'm Roslyn. I'm a horse healer. Your innkeeper in Grey Hollow said you needed one." Something flickered in his expression. A quick calculation behind those gold eyes. There and gone. "He did," the man said slowly. He looked at her for a long moment, then at the mare, then back at her. A decision was being made. She could see it happening, though she could not read its shape. Then he stood, wiping his hands on his trousers, and something in his posture shifted. Settled. As though he had chosen something and was committing to it completely. "I'm Fen," he said. "I tend the horses here." "Well, Fen." She crouched beside the mare and ran her fingers along the swollen joint, feeling the heat beneath the skin. The mare huffed but did not pull away. "Let me show you what comfrey root looks like, because this yarrow paste is doing absolutely nothing." He crouched beside her. He smelled like hay and wood smoke, and something underneath. Something warm and deep and oddly steadying, like standing in a clearing where no wind reached. She ignored it. "Show me," he said. She did. He was a quick learner. She would give him that. By the second day, Roslyn had stripped the old poultice, prepared a fresh, comfrey compress, and begun the slow work of reducing the mare's inflammation. The injury was not serious, just a strained tendon left untreated too long, but it would take a week of careful wrapping and cold soaks before the mare could bear full weight again. A week. She had not planned to stay a week. But the mare needed her, and Fen was unexpectedly easy company, and the lodge was quiet in a way that did not make her restless. That last part troubled her more than she wanted to admit. Roslyn was always restless. It was the defining fact of her life, the constant pull in her chest that said, "Move, go, do not settle, do not let them learn your name." She had been on the road since she was 16, the year her mother had told her to run and not look back. 7 years of sleeping in barns and rented rooms and, when the weather was kind, under open sky. 7 years of learning every herb and poultice and bone-setting trick she could gather. Trading her skills for coin and meals and the freedom of never belonging to anyone. She was good at leaving. She was exceptional at it. So it unsettled her that by the second morning at the lodge, she had already begun to notice the rhythm of the place. The way the light came through the stable doors at dawn, catching the dust motes in long gold columns. The way Fen moved around the horses with a patience that bordered on tenderness, his hands steady and sure, his voice low enough that even the nervous chestnut gelding in the far stall would still for him. "You're good with them," she said, watching him rub down the gelding's neck while she mixed a fresh poultice at the work table. "Better than most grooms I've seen. Most men handle horses like they're trying to win an argument. Most men handle everything that way," he said. She laughed. It came out before she could catch it, a real laugh, surprised out of her. He glanced over at the sound, and something in his face softened. "Where did you learn?" she asked. "Horses, I mean." "Here." He turned back to the gelding, but his voice stayed warm. "I grew up around them. Before I was old enough to be anything else, I was this, just a boy in a stable, talking to horses because they listened better than people." "They do listen better." "Considerably." She smiled and held out the finished poultice. "Come here. I will show you how to wrap properly. If you are going to keep botching her care after I leave, you should at least know the basics." He crossed the stable and knelt beside her at the mare's foreleg. The stall was narrow, and his shoulder pressed against hers as he leaned in to watch. He was warm. Even through 2 layers of fabric she could feel the heat of him, steady and radiating, and his scent was stronger this close. That deep, underneath smell. She still could not name it, only that it made her breathing slow down and the knot between her shoulders loosen in a way that nothing else ever had. "Hold here," she said, guiding his hand to the compress. "Firm, but not tight. You want even pressure across the whole tendon. If you press too hard on one side, the inflammation just migrates." His hand was larger than hers, his fingers rough with work. He held the compress exactly where she placed it, with a steadiness that made the instruction feel almost unnecessary. "Now wrap," she said, handing him the linen strip. Over, under, overlap by half. Not like you are bandaging a wound. Think of it like swaddling. You are comparing my horse care to infant care. If the comparison fits. He rapped, slowly, carefully, mirroring the motion she had shown him. His brow furrowed in concentration, and she noticed, not for the first time, that his hands were oddly precise for a stable hand. Strong but controlled, as though every movement was considered, measured, deliberate. Better, she said when he finished. Still too loose at the top, but better. High praise. I do not give high praise. I give accurate assessments. Is that different? Considerably. He looked at her sidelong, and the corner of his mouth curved, and something warm and reckless flickered in her chest. She looked away. She taught him the cold water soak method next, filling a bucket from the stream behind the stable and showing him how to hold the mare's leg in the water for a count of 200. The mare was patient about it, standing hip-cocked and drowsy, her ears flicking lazily at flies. Fen counted under his breath, and Roslyn sat on an upturned bucket nearby and sorted through her satchel, cataloging her supplies. You carry your whole life in that bag, he observed. Everything I need. That is either admirably efficient or deeply sad. It is practical. Practical, he repeated, as though tasting the word. Is that what you call it when someone carries 7 years of running in a leather satchel and pretends it is a choice? She looked up sharply. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Most people accepted her explanations at face value, the smiling wanderer, the free spirit, the healer who preferred the road. No one had ever looked underneath the story and called it what it was. That was rude, she said. It was honest. Those are not mutually exclusive. No, he agreed. They are not. They looked at each other for a beat too long. Then the mare shifted her weight and splashed water over the rim of the bucket, and Fen looked down at his soaked boots and said, with perfect deadpan, "She has better aim than I expected." The tension broke. She laughed again, that surprised, involuntary laugh, and shook her head. She smiled. The comfrey paste was smooth under her hands, the familiar green smell of it grounding her. My mother taught me herbs. She was a healer in our village, back before. She stopped. The sentence had wandered too close to something she did not discuss. She taught me herbs, she said again, simpler this time. He did not push. He let the silence sit between them like a living thing, comfortable and undemanding. That was the other thing about Fen. He let things be. He let her work without offering unsolicited advice. He let her take the lead with the mare without the wounded pride most men showed when a woman corrected them. He let her eat supper in the lodge kitchen without pressing her for conversation she did not want to give. He let her. It should not have mattered so much. But Roslyn had spent 7 years surrounded by men who did not let her do anything without asserting their authority first, and the absence of that pressure was like stepping out of a headwind she had stopped noticing. Suddenly she could stand straight. Suddenly she could breathe. On the third evening, they sat on the paddock fence watching the sun go down behind the tree line, and she told him about the time she had set a broken leg on a draft horse in the middle of a thunderstorm using nothing but 2 fence posts and a length of rope. He listened with his elbows on his knees and his gold eyes bright with something that was either admiration or amusement or both. You did that alone? He asked. I do everything alone. That sounds exhausting. It sounds free. He looked at her then, a long look she could not interpret. Does it? The question landed somewhere in her chest and stayed there. The trouble started on the 4th night. Not trouble, exactly. Something worse. Something quieter. A shift in the air between them that Roslyn recognized with a sinking certainty, because she had spent her whole adult life making sure it never happened. She was getting comfortable. It had crept up on her in small ways. She had started leaving her satchel unpacked on the chair in the guest room instead of keeping it buckled and ready by the door. She had started humming while she worked, something she only did when she forgot to be guarded. She had started looking for Fen in the morning before she looked for anything else, listening for his footsteps on the stable floor, registering his presence the way a compass registers north, and her wolf. Her quiet, cautious wolf who had kept her alive through 7 years of road and risk had gone still. Not wary, still. Not danger still. The other kind. The kind that meant something enormous was happening just below the surface, too big and too slow to fight, like the turning of a tide. She sat across from him at the lodge table that evening, a bowl of stew between her hands, and tried to name the feeling. The fire crackled in the hearth. Rain was tapping against the windows, gentle and persistent. He had made the stew himself, because apparently there were no house servants at the lodge, just him and an older man named Euan, who managed the grounds and who had been away in the village since before she arrived. "Who owns this estate?" she asked, partly because she was curious and partly because she needed to talk about something that was not the way the firelight caught the line of his jaw. "A lord from the Eastern Territories." He said it easily, without hesitation. "He comes a few times a year. Hunting mostly. I keep the place running when he's away." "So you're here alone most of the time?" "I am." "And you like that?" He considered the question with the same thoughtfulness he gave everything, turning it over before answering. "I like the quiet. I like the horses. I like being able to walk outside at dawn and hear nothing but the birds and the river." He paused. "But I would be lying if I said it was not lonely sometimes." "You do not seem like the type to mind loneliness." "No one minds loneliness until they have a reason not to be lonely." The sentence landed precisely where he aimed it. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks and covered it by lifting her bowl and drinking the broth. The stew was good. Better than good. The meat was tender, the root vegetables cooked to the point of sweetness, the herbs balanced with the confidence of someone who had been cooking for himself for years. She had eaten in 100 inns and taverns across 3 territories, and this stew, made by a stable hand in a minor lord's kitchen, was better than most of them. Another thing that did not add up, but she was not yet ready to examine the ledger. "Have you ever wanted something different?" she asked. "More than this?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he would not answer. The fire popped and sent a shower of sparks up the chimney. Rain traced crooked lines down the dark window panes. "I used to think I wanted more," he said finally. "Responsibility. Purpose. A life that mattered to someone beyond myself." He turned his bowl slowly between his hands. "And then I got it. And I realized that what I actually wanted was this. A fire. A quiet room. Someone to share a meal with who did not want anything from me except my company." She looked down at her stew. "Lonely is safer than the alternative." "What alternative?" "Belonging somewhere. Belonging to someone." The words came out harder than she intended. She softened them with a shrug. "In my experience, one always follows the other. You belong somewhere long enough, and someone decides you belong to them." The silence that followed was different from the comfortable ones they had shared before. Heavier, full of something unspoken. "Is that why you keep moving?" he asked. "I keep moving because I like moving." "Roslyn." Her name in his mouth did something to her she was not prepared for. A low pull, a warmth that started in her stomach and spread outward, and underneath it, her wolf going so still that the rest of the world seemed to vibrate around the silence. "Yes," she said quietly. "That is why I keep moving." He nodded. He did not tell her she was wrong. He did not tell her that not all belonging was captivity, that not all men were the ones she was running from. He just nodded and let her truth sit in the room alongside his own. "For what it is worth," he said, "I am glad you stopped here." She met his eyes across the table. gold in the firelight, steady and warm and looking at her with an expression that made her feel, for one terrifying second, like she had already stopped running and simply had not noticed yet. "So am I," she said, and meant it. The mare was healing well. By the fifth morning, the swelling had reduced to a faint puffiness around the joint, and she was putting weight on the leg with only a slight favoring. Roslyn knelt in the straw, running her hands along the tendon, checking for heat. "Another 2 days," she said. "Maybe 3. Then she will be sound." Fen was behind her, cleaning tack. She heard the pause in his hands, the small silence before he said, "And then you leave." It was not a question. "And then I leave." Another pause. "Where will you go?" "South, probably. There is always work south of the river in summer. Foaling season." "Foaling season," he repeated, as though the words meant something else entirely. She stood, brushing straw from her trousers, and turned to find him closer than she expected. He was holding a bridle in one hand, but he had gone still, watching her with that expression she had started to recognize, the one that made her feel seen in a way that was both wonderful and unbearable. "Fen, there is something I need to tell you." Her stomach tightened. Here it was. The thing she had been dreading without naming, the moment every easy conversation and shared silence had been building toward. He was going to tell her he wanted her to stay. He was going to make it complicated, the way men always did, and she was going to have to leave sooner than planned because she could not afford to want what he was offering. "You do not have to," she said quickly. "Whatever it is, I already know." "You do not. I know that look. And I am telling you, you do not want a woman like me. I am not the staying kind, Fen. I am not built for it." He set the bridle down. He stepped closer. Not crowding her, just closing the distance between them with a deliberateness that made the air feel thick. He smelled like wood smoke and hay and that deep, warm steadiness underneath, and her wolf was so quiet inside her that she could hear her own heartbeat, slow and sure, as though her body had made a decision her mind was still arguing against. "That is not what I was going to say," he said. "Then what?" He reached out and took her hand. Just her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers with a gentleness that cracked something open in her chest. His skin was rough and warm, and she could feel the calluses on his palms. Real calluses, earned from real work. "I was going to say that you have dirt on your face," he said. She blinked. "What?" He lifted his other hand and brushed his thumb across her cheekbone, just below her left eye. The touch was feather light, and it sent a shock of warmth through her entire body. "There," he said. "Gone now." She should have stepped back. She should have pulled her hand free and returned to the mare and the comfrey and the safe, predictable rhythm of work. That was what she always did. That was who she was. She did not step back. "You are a terrible liar," she whispered. There was no dirt. "No," he agreed. There was not. He kissed her. It was not urgent or demanding. It was slow and warm and tasted like the mint tea they had shared that morning, and it undid her so completely that she stopped thinking. Her hands came up to his chest, feeling the rough fabric of his work shirt under her palms, and he cupped her face in both hands as though she were something fragile and important, and her wolf did not stir because her wolf had known since the first moment she crouched beside him in the mud and smelled that deep steadiness beneath the hay and smoke. He let her pull away first. He let her catch her breath, her forehead pressed against his collarbone, her hands still fisted in the front of his shirt. "I am still leaving," she said, but her voice was shaking. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. "I know." He let her believe it. Euan arrived the next morning. Roslyn heard the horse before she saw the rider. Hooves on the packed earth of the road approaching from the east. She was in the stable, rewrapping the mare's leg, and Fen was in the paddock brushing down the gelding. She stepped out into the pale morning light and watched an older man on a sturdy bay horse ride into the clearing. He was weathered and broad-shouldered, with a gray-streaked beard and the careful posture of a man who had spent decades around large animals. His clothes were plain but well-made, better quality than she would have expected for a groundskeeper. Dark wool coat, polished boots, a brass pin at his collar shaped like a running hound. "That is Euan," Fen said from behind her. He had appeared at the paddock gate, and something in his tone had changed. Tighter, almost wary. "He manages the property." Euan swung down from his horse and crossed the yard in 4 long strides. His eyes found Fen immediately, and what happened next made no sense. He bowed. It was small, a dip of the head, quick and automatic. The kind of gesture so deeply ingrained that the body performed it before the mind could intervene. But Roslyn saw it. She saw the way Euan's shoulders dropped and his chin lowered, and his right hand moved instinctively to his chest, a gesture she had seen 100 times from soldiers and servants in the presence of their betters. Fen saw her seeing it. His jaw tightened. "Euan," he said, and the single word carried a weight she had never heard in his voice before. A command wrapped in a name. Euan straightened, glanced at Roslyn, and something passed between the two men. A silent conversation conducted in a look. "My lord," Euan said, and then caught himself. "Fen. Good to see you well." "My lord." The words hung in the air like smoke. "This is Roslyn," Fen said evenly. "She is a horse healer. She has been treating the gray mare's leg." Euan's expression shifted through several stages: surprise, understanding, something that looked remarkably like exasperation before settling on a careful neutrality. "A horse healer, of course." He extended his hand. "Euan Farrow. I manage the grounds." She shook his hand. It was rough and calloused and honest, and his scent was unremarkable: hay and leather and old sweat. But underneath the polite introduction, she could smell something else: nervousness, sharp and acrid, like vinegar. He was nervous. Why was the groundskeeper nervous? Over the next few hours, Roslyn watched. She was good at watching. 7 years on the road had made her an expert at reading rooms and relationships, at detecting the subtle power dynamics that told her who was truly in charge and who was performing authority. The dynamics at the lodge were wrong. Euan deferred to Fen in everything. Not the casual deference of a senior employee to a junior one, but the deep, structural deference of a man who had spent a lifetime serving someone whose word was law. He asked permission before unsaddling his horse. He waited for Fen to sit before he sat. He lowered his eyes when Fen spoke directly to him, and Fen's speech changed when Euan was present. The easy, unguarded warmth she had grown used to acquired an edge. He spoke more carefully, more precisely, as though he were remembering, with visible effort, to use smaller words and simpler sentences than came naturally. There were other things, too. Small things, the kind that only someone trained by years of wariness would notice. When the 3 of them ate together at midday, Euan served the food. Not in the casual way of a man taking his turn in a shared kitchen, but in the precise, practiced way of someone for whom serving was a duty. He placed Fen's bowl first. He poured Fen's water first. He did not begin eating until Fen lifted his spoon. Fen caught himself twice reaching for a word that did not belong to a stable hand. The first time, discussing the repair of a fence post, he said, "I will instruct," and then amended it to, "I will ask." The second time, when Roslyn mentioned a territorial dispute she had ridden through near the Greymarch border, he began to say something about diplomatic negotiations and stopped mid-sentence, covering the stumble with a cough and a change of subject. And his hands. She had noticed his hands before. But now, watching him beside Euan, The contrast was impossible to ignore. Euan's hands were what you expected from a man who had worked grounds and stables for 30 years. Blunt, scarred, with permanently darkened knuckles and nails that would never come clean. Fenn's hands were calloused, yes, but the calluses were wrong. They were too uniform, too recent, layered over skin that was fundamentally smooth. The hands of a man who had acquired roughness by choice rather than circumstance. The hands of a man playing a part. In the afternoon, she found Euan alone in the tack room, mending a bridle. "How long have you worked here?" she asked. 30 years. He did not look up. "Since before the current lord came of age." "And Fen?" Now he looked up. His eyes were careful. "What about him?" "How long has he been the stable hand here?" Euan held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then he went back to his mending. "Long enough." That was not an answer. She knew it was not an answer. And the way he said it, with that particular tightness around his mouth, told her he knew it too. "He is not a stable hand," she said quietly. "Is he?" Euan's hands stopped moving. "You should ask him that," he said. "Not me." She did not ask him. She went looking for the answer herself, because that was what 7 years of survival had taught her to do. Do not ask. Find out. Trust your own eyes before you trust anyone's words. It took less than an hour. The lodge had a study on the 2nd floor that she had not entered before, assuming it was the absent lord's private quarters. The door was unlocked. Inside, she found a writing desk, bookshelves, a fire laid but unlit, and, on the wall above the mantel, a portrait. It was him. Not in his mud-streaked work shirt with his hair sticking up and straw on his sleeves. In the portrait, Fenrir Renwick stood in polished black boots and an amber-brown leather coat with brass clasps that caught the painted light. A brass crown sat on his dark hair. Behind him, the banner of the Eastern Reach, a silver wolf on a field of black, hung floor to ceiling. The face was the same. The gold eyes were the same. The set of the jaw, the quiet steadiness in his expression, the way he held his shoulders as though the weight on them was not a burden, but a fact. All the same. Alpha King Fenrir Renwick, ruler of the Eastern Reach, lord of the Greymarch Pact, commander of 13 sworn packs, not a stable hand, not Fen, a king. The room tilted. Roslyn gripped the back of the desk chair and forced herself to breathe. Her wolf, her treacherous, too quiet wolf, stirred for the first time in days. Not with alarm. With recognition, as though it had known all along and had simply been waiting for her mind to catch up. No. No, no, no. Every moment from the past 5 days rearranged itself in her mind with sickening speed. The too fine lodge, the too perfect stew, the way his vocabulary sometimes outstripped a stable hand's education before he reined it back. The way Euan had bowed, the way the horses responded to him not with the familiarity of an employee, but with the deference of creatures who recognized something in him that she had willfully refused to see. The kiss in the stable, where she had pressed her hands against his chest and felt the rough fabric of his work shirt and thought, "This is real. This is a man with nothing to hide, and all along he had been hiding everything." She heard his footsteps on the stairs, measured and unhurried, the footsteps of a man who owned the floors he walked on. She understood that now. She understood everything now. The quality of the lodge, too fine for a minor lord's retreat. The way Euan bowed before he could stop himself. The way Fenrir spoke with the careful restraint of a man accustomed to his words carrying the force of law. He appeared in the doorway. He saw her standing in front of the portrait. He saw the expression on her face. "Roslyn, do not." Her voice came out raw, scraped thin. "Do not say my name like that. You do not get to say my name like that." He stepped into the room. She stepped back. "I was going to tell you." "When?" The word cracked between them. When were you going to tell me? Before or after you let me? Before or after I? She could not finish the sentence. The kiss. The way she had pressed her face into his chest and told him she was still leaving, and he had held her like she was precious. And the whole time. The whole time. You let me think you were no one, she said. You let me talk to you like... You let me tell you things I have never told anyone, and you were. You are. She gestured at the portrait. You are a king. I am. You let me believe a lie. The words hit him. She saw it. The flinch he did not quite suppress, the way his hands closed at his sides. I let you believe I was a man who tends horses at a forest lodge. That is not a lie. I am that man. You are the Alpha King of the Eastern Reach. I am also that. There is no also. Her voice rose and the sound of it bounced off the stone walls and came back to her, sharp and breaking. You are a king, Fenrir. You command 13 packs. You are exactly the kind of man I have spent my entire life running from, and you let me. He let her. The phrase turned to poison in her mouth. Everything he had let her do, speak freely, work uninterrupted, touch him, kiss him. It had not been kindness, it had been a performance. A king playing at being common so that a common woman would lower her guard. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? He was quiet for a long time. Rain had begun to fall outside, tapping against the study windows. Because you were the first person in 11 years who looked at me and saw a man instead of a crown, he said. And I was not ready to lose that. Her throat closed. She shook her head hard and pushed past him toward the door. His hand came up, not to grab her, just a reflexive reach. And she flinched away from it so violently that he went completely still. Roslyn, please. Do not follow me, she said. He let her go. She made it as far as the stable. Her hands were shaking as she pulled her mare's saddle from the rack, shaking so badly that the buckle slipped through her fingers twice before she managed to secure the girth. The rain was picking up, drumming on the stable roof, and she could smell it on the wind, wet earth and cold stone and the sharp green scent of the forest waking up to the storm. Her wolf was howling, not out loud, inside. A long, low, anguished sound that vibrated through her bones and made her teeth ache. Her wolf did not want to leave. Her wolf wanted to turn around and go back up those stairs and press her face against his chest and breathe in that deep, steady scent that had been quieting her restlessness for 5 days and never stop breathing it in. She saddled the mare anyway. You're leaving in a storm. Euan stood in the stable doorway, arms crossed, his weathered face unreadable. Move, she said. He did not move. I have known that man since he was a boy who preferred the company of horses to courtiers. He was not performing for you. He was not pretending to be common. He comes here to be the part of himself the crown does not allow. He lied to me. He omitted. There is a difference. Not to me, there isn't. Euan studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. For what it is worth, he told me 2 days ago he wanted to tell you the truth. I am the one who cautioned him to wait. If you need someone to blame, blame me. She led her mare past him into the rain. The water hit her face cold and sharp, and she welcomed it because it gave her something to feel that was not the cracking, splintering ache in her chest. She had known. Some part of her had known from the beginning, the way she always knew when something was too good to be real. A kind man in a quiet place who let her be herself. A man with gold eyes and gentle hands who did not need anything from her except her company. Of course it was a lie. Of course the man was a king. Of course the safety was an illusion, because safety was always an illusion when you were a woman alone in a world run by powerful men. Her mother had taught her that. Roslyn mounted up and turned her mare toward the road. The forest closed around her almost immediately, the canopy cutting the rain to a fine mist. She did not look back. She had learned long ago that looking back was the first step toward going back, and going back was how you got caught. The road south was muddy and narrowing. Her mare picked her way carefully through the ruts, ears pinned against the rain, and Roslyn hunched in her cloak and let the motion of the horse carry her forward the way it always had, one stride at a time, 1 mile at a time, one town after the next, until the place she was leaving became just another name she would not say out loud, except her wolf would not stop keening. It was a low, persistent vibration behind her ribs, a sound no one else could hear, and it grew louder with every step the mare took away from the lodge, away from him. Her wolf had never done this before. In 7 years of leaving, 7 years of walking away from beds and barns and the handful of people who had been kind to her, her wolf had never once protested. Her wolf understood the rule. You leave before they have power over you. You leave before staying becomes a chain. But now her wolf was pulling backward like a dog on a lead, digging its heels into the ground of her ribcage, and the sensation was so disorienting that she rode for 20 minutes before she had to stop because she could not see through the tears. She dismounted in a small clearing beside a stream swollen with rainwater and sat on a fallen log and pressed her hands over her face and shook. She was not crying for him. She was crying for the version of him that did not exist, the stable hand named Fen, who had no power over anyone and wanted nothing from the world except to tend his horses in peace. She was crying for the 5 days she had spent in that lodge feeling, for the first time since she was 16, like she could stop running, like she had found the place where her restlessness went quiet. She was crying because the stillness had been real, even if the man was not. Her mother's face came to her unbidden. Not the last version, the hollowed, careful version who had pressed a hand to Roslyn's cheek in the dark and whispered, "Run." The earlier version, the one who laughed while she ground herbs, who taught her daughter the names of every wildflower in the valley, who smelled like chamomile and warm bread and safety. That woman had been erased by a king, not killed, erased, absorbed into a powerful man's household like water into dry earth, her name replaced with the healer, her choices replaced with orders, her life reduced to the dimensions of her usefulness. She had survived. She was probably still surviving, somewhere in a stone hall far to the north, grinding herbs for a man who had taken everything from her except her skill. Roslyn had sworn she would not be erased. And then she had gone and kissed a king in a stable and let herself believe it was something else entirely. The rain softened to a drizzle. The forest dripped and ticked around her. She smelled him before she heard him. Not the full alpha scent, not the rolling dominance that kings carried like weather, just the underneath. Hay and wood smoke, and that deep, warm steadiness that had made her wolf go still from the very first moment. She looked up. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, on foot, in his rough brown work shirt and his worn leather vest and his muddy boots, soaked through, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, breathing hard as though he had been running. He had come after her, not on horseback, not with guards, not with the weight of his title, on foot, in his stable boy clothes, the only version of himself she had ever wanted. "You let me leave," she said. "You asked me to. I also asked you not to follow me. I know." He stayed at the edge of the clearing, not coming closer. Rain dripped from his jaw. "I know you did, and I know you have every reason to keep going and not look back. But I need you to hear this, and then I will let you choose." Let her choose, even now. Even standing in the rain with his chest heaving, he was giving her the choice. "My mother was a healer," she said, and the words came out before she could stop them. Not the thing she had planned to say, something older, deeper, dragged up from the place she kept it locked. He went still, listening. She was a healer in a village called Ashburn, a small pack, peaceful. And when I was 9, an alpha from the north rode in with 50 wolves and claimed the territory. He claimed the village. He claimed the people. Her voice was flat and careful, held together with the same precision she used to set broken bones. And he claimed my mother, not as a mate, as property, because she was useful, and because he could. The rain was the only sound. She told me to run. The night I turned 16, she put her hand on my face and said, "Do not let a powerful man decide your life for you, Roslyn. Run, and do not stop running until you find a place where they cannot reach you." She met his eyes across the clearing. "I have been running ever since, and you are the most powerful man I have ever met." He did not flinch. He did not look away. "I know what I am," he said. "I know what men like me have done. I know that the word king carries the weight of every king who has used his power to take what was not offered, and I cannot undo what was done to your mother, or erase the years you spent running because of what she suffered." He took one step forward. Just one. "But I am telling you, Roslyn Fernsby, that I did not bring you to that lodge by design. I did not plan for you to ride into my clearing and call my poultice wrong and make me laugh for the first time in a year. I did not plan to fall in love with a woman who carries her whole life in a leather satchel and argues with horses and cannot sit still for more than 5 minutes unless she is near me." Her breath caught. "I notice that," he said quietly. "You stop fidgeting when I am close. Your hands go still. Your wolf goes quiet. I feel it too, Roslyn. When you are near me, the weight of the crown goes quiet. You are the only peace I have ever known." The stillness bond. She had been trying to ignore it for days, the way her constant hum of restlessness just stopped when he was close. The way her wolf, who had kept her moving and alert and alive for 7 years, simply settled in his presence. Not submission, not surrender. Rest. "I am not asking you to stay because I am a king, and I can command it," he said. "I am asking you to stay because I am a man standing in the rain in a shirt I bought at a village market 3 years ago, and you are the only person in the world who has ever made me feel like this shirt is enough." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Rain and tears, indistinguishable. "You lied to me," she said, but the edge was gone from it. "I withheld, and I was wrong, and I am sorry. You are a king." "I am also a man who is very bad at poultices." A sound escaped her that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. She pressed her hand over her mouth to contain it. "You let me believe you were no one," she said. "I let you see the part of me that no one else is allowed to see. The court sees the crown. The pack see the alpha. Euan sees the boy he raised. You." He paused. "You saw the man who talks to horses because they listen better than people. That is not no one, Roslyn. That is the only version of me that is real." The rain had stopped. She had not noticed when. The forest was dripping and green and impossibly quiet, and he was standing 10 feet away in his muddy boots with his heart in his hands. "If I stay," she said carefully, "I am not a queen. I am not a title. I am a horse healer with a satchel and an attitude, and I will not kneel for anyone. I would never ask you to. And if I need to leave sometimes, if the restlessness comes back and I need to ride out and be on the road for a while, you let me. I let you. You let me come back on my own terms. I let you come back on your own terms." She looked at him for a long time. The man in the work shirt, soaked and shivering, who had run through the rain after her without a horse or a crown or a single guard. He let her choose. She chose. She did not run to him. That was not who she was, and he knew it. Instead, She stood up from the fallen log, wiped her hands on her trousers, and walked toward him with the deliberate, unhurried gait of a woman who was choosing every single step. He waited. He did not reach for her. He let her come to him. She stopped a foot away, close enough to feel the warmth of him through his wet clothes, close enough to smell that steadiness again, the one that made her wolf settle like a stone finding the bottom of a river. "You are going to tell me everything," she said. "All of it. The crown, the pacts, the politics, the parts you hate. No more omissions. All of it. And I am going to yell at you. Probably more than once." His mouth twitched. "I look forward to it. And the lodge stays. This place. Our place. I am not living in a castle surrounded by courtiers who call me lady and expect me to wear silk." "The lodge stays." She studied his face. Rain was beaded on his eyelashes, catching the last of the gray afternoon light. He looked exhausted and hopeful and terrified, and he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Fen," she said. "Roslyn." She reached up and wiped the rain from his jaw with her thumb, the same gesture he had used when he had pretended there was dirt on her face. His eyes closed at her touch. A sound escaped him, quiet and involuntary, and she felt it in her chest, in her bones, in the silent place where her wolf had been waiting. "You let me," she said softly. "From the very first moment. You let me be myself. It was the easiest thing I have ever done." She kissed him. This time it was different. This time she knew who he was, and she kissed him anyway. She kissed the king and the stable hand and the man who ran through the rain after her in a market-bought shirt, and he held her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking for years. His hands came up to her face, her hair, the back of her neck. She fisted her hands in the front of his vest and pulled him closer. He tasted like rain and mint and home, and she thought, with a clarity that cut through every defense she had ever built, "I am not running. I am not running, and I do not want to." "Come back to the lodge," he murmured against her mouth. "Take me back to the lodge." He took her hand. They walked back through the dripping forest together, fingers laced, and the silence between them was the same silence it had always been. Comfortable, undemanding, real. Her mare followed behind them, untethered, picking her way along the muddy path with the placid disinterest of a horse who had seen worse weather and worse drama. The rain had stopped entirely now, and the forest was coming alive in its aftermath, water dripping from every leaf, birds tentatively resuming their calls, the air washed clean and sharp with the smell of wet pine and earth. Roslyn's wolf had gone quiet again. Not the forced quiet of suppression, but the deep, settled quiet of arriving somewhere, of stopping. She could feel the stillness bond between them like a living thing, a warmth that ran from his hand through hers and settled in her chest. And for the first time in 7 years, the pull that said, "Move, go, keep running," was simply absent. Not overridden, not fought, gone. She glanced at Fenrir. His profile in the gray light was the same face she had studied across the kitchen table, across the paddock fence, across the narrow space of a horse stall. The same jaw, the same quiet certainty in the set of his mouth. Knowing he was a king did not change the face. It only changed the frame around it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Practically. What does it mean, being with a king?" "It means I have extremely boring council meetings that I will no longer have to attend alone." "That is not an answer." "It means whatever you want it to mean, Roslyn. I am not going to hand you a contract and a crown. I am going to hand you a life, and you can shape it however you need." "And if I shape it to include yelling at you in front of your courtiers?" "I suspect that will happen regardless of how we shape it." She squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back, and the forest opened into the clearing, and the lodge was there, gray stone and green moss, smoke still curling from the chimney, looking exactly like the safe, quiet place she had mistaken it for when she first arrived. The mistake, she realized, was thinking that the safety had been a lie. The lodge was safe. The man was safe. The only lie had been the name, and even that had been half true. Fen was short for Fenrir, and Fenrir was the man who talked to horses and cooked good stew and kissed her like she was the most important person in the world. The crown was just the part she had not seen yet. Euan was waiting in the stable doorway when they emerged from the tree line. He took one look at them, hand in hand, soaked to the bone and smiling like fools, and his weathered face cracked into a grin. "Well," he said, "took you long enough." "Not a word, Euan," Fenrir said, but he was smiling. "I told him to tell you on the second day," Euan said to Roslyn. "For the record, I told him, she is going to find out and she is going to be furious, and he said, 'I know, just one more day. And then one more. And then one more.'" "One more day," Roslyn repeated, looking up at Fenrir. His ears had gone red. The Alpha King of the Eastern Reach, ruler of 13 packs, was blushing. She laughed. A real laugh, full and bright, and it echoed off the stable walls and startled the gelding in the far stall. "Euan," she said, "does the lord of this lodge have any dry clothes, or does he only own the one shirt?" "I believe," Euan said with great dignity, "that his grace has an entire wardrobe upstairs that he has been carefully ignoring in your presence." Fenrir looked at her. She looked at him. And the absurdity of it, the mud and the rain and the portrait on the wall, and the week she had spent bossing around a king in his own stable, hit her all at once. She leaned into him, shaking with laughter, and he wrapped his arms around her and pressed his face into her wet hair and held her. "For the record," he said into her hair, "the poultice was bad on purpose. I needed a reason to keep you here." She pulled back. "You deliberately botched a poultice on a lame horse to lure a healer?" "I may have applied the yarrow more thickly than was strictly necessary. That is the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. It worked." She stared at him. Then she kissed him again, because he was ridiculous and gentle and soaking wet and hers. 3 months later, the lodge smelled like comfrey and wood smoke and the particular brand of chaos that followed Roslyn Fernsby wherever she went. She had not moved to the castle. She had been very clear about that, but she had stopped leaving, which was its own kind of revolution. The spare room that had been the guest chamber was now her workroom, shelves lined with dried herbs and glass jars and the collected medicinal knowledge of 7 years on the road. She had taken over a section of the stable for serious cases, and word had spread through the surrounding villages that the king's mate was a horse healer who would treat any animal brought to her door. No questions asked and no payment refused. The king's mate. She was still getting used to the sound of it. Fenrir came to the lodge every week, sometimes more. He would arrive on horseback, dismount, and walk into the stable to find her elbow deep in some mare's poultice, and the crown would come off before the coat did. He kept his rough brown work shirt on a hook by the stable door. She had washed it twice. He had asked her to stop because, he said, it was losing its character. "Character," she had said. "Is that what we are calling the smell?" He had kissed the side of her neck and stolen a sprig of rosemary from her drying rack, and she had let him, because she let him do most things now, the same way he let her do most things, and the letting had become the language they spoke. She had met the court, once. It had gone roughly as she expected. 24 nobles in silk and embroidery, staring at the woman in the olive jacket with the herb satchel and the mud on her boots. And she had stared back with the flat, unimpressed expression of someone who had set a horse's broken leg in a thunderstorm and was not going to be intimidated by anyone whose greatest hardship was a wrinkled cravat. Fenrir had stood beside her with the barely concealed delight of a man watching the love of his life terrify his entire aristocracy. She had not gone back. He had not asked her to. Instead, They had built something between the castle and the lodge. He ruled from the seat of power and lived at the edge of the forest, and the distance between those two places was exactly the width of her freedom. She rode out when the restlessness came, a day here, 3 days there, always along the southern roads where the foaling farms needed tending and the villages needed a healer. She always came back. He always let her come back on her own terms. On this particular morning, she was sitting on the paddock fence watching the gray mare, fully healed now and gleaming in the autumn light, trot circles around the enclosure. The mare was sound. Better than sound. She moved with a fluid, joyful ease that made Roslyn's chest ache with a satisfaction she had never felt in all her years of healing. She heard him before she saw him. Not the measured footsteps of a king, the easy, unhurried steps of a man in muddy boots crossing a yard he loved. He climbed onto the fence beside her. He was wearing the brown shirt. His hair was messy. There was straw on his sleeve. "Euan says you reorganized the entire tack room," he said. "Euan's system was a disaster." "Euan's system has worked for 30 years. Euan's system is wrong." He smiled. It was the quiet smile, the one she had first seen across a fire on the 4th night, the one that crinkled the corners of his gold eyes and made him look like exactly what he was, a man who talked to horses because they listened better. "Are you happy?" he asked. She considered the question. Below them, the mare tossed her head and broke into a canter, tail streaming behind her like a banner. The autumn light was golden and slanting through the trees, painting the paddock in honey and amber, and the air smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke and the dried lavender bundles she had hung in the stable doorway last week. A year ago, if someone had asked her where she would be in 12 months, she would have said, somewhere else. That had always been the answer. Somewhere else, somewhere new, somewhere she had not yet worn out her welcome or stayed long enough to feel the walls closing in. She had not felt the walls close once. Not here. Not with him. "I do not know if happy is the right word," she said slowly. "I am still. I have never been still before, Fen. My whole life, there was this pull in my chest, telling me to move, to go, to keep running. And it is quiet now. It has been quiet since the day I met you." He reached over and took her hand. His thumb traced a slow circle on her wrist, and her wolf settled deeper into the stillness, into the warmth, into the certainty that this was real and permanent and hers. "I am still," she said again, "and I chose it." He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "You let me choose," she said. "Always." The mare cantered another circle, and the autumn sun caught the brass clasp at Roslyn's throat. And somewhere inside the lodge, Euan was muttering about the tack room, and the forest dripped and breathed and held its silence around the two of them like a cupped hand. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He let her. He always let her.